What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be showing you how to make a display rack that is capable of displaying various items. You can also make it capable of displaying blocks, although that's going to be more work on your end, and I will only show you how to make it capable of displaying items in this tutorial. It's pretty self-explanatory once you understand how to make it display items to then make it display blocks, but I will go ahead and warn you, it's going to be a lot more work. In fact, the more items that you want to be able to display on this rack, the more work it is going to be. So I highly recommend that you pick a specific type of item and only let it hold that type of item, such as food or tools or armor or something like that, because if you want it capable of holding every single item in the game, it's going to be a lot of work and a ton of code on your end. It's also not going to work with anything modded, because with Mcreator it can't be very intuitive. It has to be pretty much built from scratch with every single possibility already hard coded into it. So to summarize, basically this is a very easy thing to make. It's very easy to understand, but the more diverse items you want it to be capable of holding, the more work you're going to have to put into it on the front end. So while it's not that hard to understand, it can become an absolute ton of work incredibly quickly. So with that quick disclaimer out of the way, the first thing we need to do is open a program called Blockbench, because for this display rack we need a custom block model. We actually do not want to use an existing block model, so it's not quite as simple as just making our own resource texture in Mcreator. We have to actually make our own block model in Blockbench. I've got a bunch of models here, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the blank Java block / item and call it display rack. So I always like to start by adding a new group and renaming it to display rack, or whatever the entirety of the item I'm trying to make is. I'm then going to add a new cube and move it over to the south side of the map. You could keep it on north side or really make it wherever you want, but I do highly recommend that you line it up and orient it with mine, and that's going to help you out, or at least keep you from getting a little bit more confused in the long run. Now we can make this rack jut out from the wall as far as we want. I think I'm going to have mine come out about 6 pixels and span the width of the entire wall. You could easily have it come in by 1 or 2 or even more than that on the sides here, and then if you place these side by side, they would not be connected to each other, but that's all up to you and your own preference as to how you want to make your rack look. So I'm going to then go and duplicate this cube right here and move it up, then make it a little bit smaller here so that you have a bit of a lip, and now we have a reasonable looking rack. That's something that can sit against the wall. Now the final thing we need to do is add in the capability for it to hold an item. But before we do that, I actually want to go ahead and give this thing a texture by importing the default stone texture over here. So if you missed the previous video, you can get vanilla textures by going down here and searching %appdata%. Then go into Minecraft, then go into your versions, scroll down to your most recent played version. Make sure you see this executable jar file. If it's not in here, just launch this version and it should create this file for you. And then use a program like WinRAR or 7-zip to open it up. We can then scroll through the assets, Minecraft textures folder, go into blocks and pull out any block texture that we want. I myself am here for the smooth stone texture, so I'm going to drag and drop it into here. Looks like that didn't quite work, so instead I'm just going to drag and drop it onto my desktop. That always works. And then from my desktop I'm going to drag and drop it into Blockbench. We can then go into the display rack here. Make sure that both of these cubes are selected, right click here and do apply to untextured faces. Now this looks pretty good, but we can make it look a little bit better by manipulating where these textures are orienting themselves. So let's start with this bottom cube here, and we want the north face. So up here we want to make sure that we're on north. We're going to click and drag this block and move it all the way down here to the bottom. And then that's going to make it look a little bit better, because now it looks like it's a full circle, kind of the way the smooth stone would otherwise be. Let's come over here to the side and do the same thing. So now our sides kind of create a reasonable shape as well. This side is actually done. This side over here still needs more work in this corner. There we go. Now let's come to the back side over here. No one's gonna see this texture, or at least they shouldn't, but if you place it against glass, they just might. So let's go ahead and fix it as well. And then all of a sudden, as long as we move this texture here, perhaps we could make this look a little bit better some ways, but I think it looks just fine. Maybe if we drew our own custom texture, it could really look good. But I wanted to show you that you can use basic textures and then reorient the positioning to try and make something that it utilizes other existing textures. The last thing we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and add a separate group for it, although technically you don't have to, and I'm going to make sure that it's inside of the display rack group, and I'm going to rename it to item. This is going to be the item that is displayed. I'm then going to add a new cube inside of that and move it so that it's mostly centered on top of our rack here. Now here's the real moment of truth. If you want this capable of holding blocks, then you're going to have to make it, or I would at least suggest that you make it about as big as you possibly can. And at least for our rack, that's going to be a 4x4. And then set that cube roughly in the center of the rack. Now whenever you place your block, essentially all you will be doing is overriding this cube's textures from being blank to having the textures of the block you want it to be storing. So that way it'll appear as though the block is sitting on here. But for the sake of this tutorial, because the block is pretty much the same concept as an item, but a lot more work, we're going to make this a flat item and make this a little bit bigger because we can now afford to make it a little bit bigger on the rack. So we can go 2, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. We now still have a square for our item, but it's a little bit centered on the rack a little bit better. In fact, let's make it even bigger. Our square is now a perfect 12 by 12, as you can see up here in the corner. So I'm going to give it a slight tilt as though it is leaning against the wall, and we should be done. So let's go to the pivot tool. It's sitting right at the base, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to go ahead and center it, although even though it technically doesn't have to be centered, and then go to the rotate tool and rotate just like this. Now I'm a little bit concerned that this is going to clip into the blocks that it is leaning against. So I'm actually going to come over here and add a new cube and move it over to the wall here and simulate our own little wall so we can kind of see how it's going to look when it's leaning against the wall. Sure enough, it is indeed clipping through. So if we want to move this in by 1, that should pretty much fix the problem. We just have to move this so that it is still a perfect square. It's now an 11 by 11, which is not exactly ideal. I would prefer if it was left even, but that's not a problem. I'm going to move it a little bit to the right, so make this negative 2.5 instead of 3. And that's going to make sure that it is still centered on our drying rack. And it does seem to lean against the wall here perfectly. We can go ahead and delete that wall and import a new texture for this. It doesn't really matter what the texture you choose is, just make sure that it's a 16 by 16 texture so that it fits properly, because that is the textures that you will be dealing with. Same deal, make sure that that cube is selected and then apply to untextured faces. You'll notice that our bacon is not sitting on the rack quite properly yet, but if we come over here and make this a little bit bigger, it now sits on the rack pretty much exactly as you would expect it to. Then we go to our east side and make it all the way down, our south side and make it the full size, our west side, bring it all the way down, our top, bring it all the way across, and our down, bring it all the way across. I'm not sure if the up, down, west, and east are ever gonna matter, but just in case, I like to go ahead and extend them all the way across so that we don't have any weird shapes. But now we have an item display rack capable of displaying our bacon item here. You'll notice if we look at it from this angle, we do have a little bit of strange clipping going on where we can see right through it, but luckily we should never really be looking through it at that angle. It should really only ever be this angle because our drying rack is going to have to be set against a solid block. So we should be just fine, just like this. how your item is displayed in the hand is usually something that I forget to modify, but is quite important. So we would likely have had to re-implement our block and resave it and redo everything because we forgot to set our display settings. So let's real quick set our display settings. Let's start with GUI up here. And these are all of your default values for vanilla blocks that are displayed in the GUI. I'm actually going to go ahead and move the translation a little bit just to try and get it centered just a little bit more inside of the GUI. And I think that looks perfect. Next up, we're going to modify the ground. And these are all the values for the default ground model. And I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I don't see any issues with this. So we're all good just like this. Next up, we want to do the item frame. Usually the only difference here is that it is scaled down to 0.5, but I think I'm going to have to go ahead and translate it as well and maybe give it a quick rotation. So it didn't end up needing any rotation, but it did end up needing a quick translation just to pull it out of the block so it is properly displayed in the item frame there. The standard third person right hand also seems to be a touch low, so we're gonna just go ahead and move it up a little bit like that so that it makes a wee bit more sense. Yeah, just like that, I'd say is perfect. We can easily copy this, go over to the third person left, and then paste, and then I believe we should be good. Let me just double check real quick. So the only traditional difference is that this is a -45, and that way when we switch between the two, they are indeed just swapping between the hands. Yeah, so that is perfect. Now we need to deal with first person right. So with the default values here for the first person right, we still can't see it, so I'm actually going to go ahead and move it up about 2.5 just so that it is barely in the frame there. Go ahead and copy once again and then paste into first person left. This is almost identical, except this needs to be changed to -135, and now we're good. And then finally, head is usually not specified because most things cannot be placed on the head, but if you want to give it a head placement, feel free. I'm going to go ahead and put it right here at the front of the head. Now that we've done all of our display settings, we can go ahead and file save the project and file save the model, and then we should be good to import into Mcreator. Go ahead and open up Mcreator once again, import any textures that you made. Because we used vanilla textures, we don't have to actually import any textures for this, but we do need to come up here and import our own 3D models. This is going to be a JSON model. A Java 3D model is for entities, but JSON is for blocks and other items. So let's go and see where we saved it. It should be under video game junk, Minecraft junk, mods, tutorials, and then right there is our display rack. So let's go ahead and open it up. This first texture is for the display rack. I know that because it is the first texture that I implemented. So let's go ahead and open up this and then search for our smooth stone. And this second texture here should be for any item that we want displayed. So our default is actually going to remain empty. So we can go ahead and save these mappings, and our default item display rack is good to go. Let's go ahead and make it as a block item. Once you've got your block item made, up here in block model, you need to come to the custom display rack model. And then right here, this is going to affect what your break particles look like. So I recommend that you also set this to smooth stone or just whatever texture you used for the display rack. Our block should indeed have rotation based on the y-axis rotation. I'm going to say from block face. Sure, let's go ahead and make it waterloggable. It shouldn't have any pitch rotation. It is technically a solid block, so we don't need any sort of cutout or anything like that. I don't know any reason to enable connected sides or mess with any of the rest of this stuff. So let's go to bounding box. We can easily generate it from the block model, and there we go. Now, one of these is going to be a special model for the item that is displayed. I believe it is this final coordinate one here, so I'm actually going to go ahead and remove it, because we don't want our item display to be part of the block model. At least I don't want it to be part of the bounding box of the block model. Next, we can come in here to properties, change the name around if we want to, change the creative tab around if we want to. In fact, I'm probably going to go ahead and put this into functional blocks. And as far as the hardness and resistance go, so that should be a 2 and a 6. Go ahead and give it a sound set that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it can only be destroyed, or the tool able to destroy it is the pickaxe, but it does not require that. It doesn't really need any advanced properties unless you want to change the block color around, which I suppose I will. And I also am going to change the reaction to being pushed to destroy. And we'll change the AI path node type to, we'll just leave it at default, I suppose. And that's everything for now, so let's go ahead and save and close. Once you have your display rack made, the easiest thing to do is probably going to be making a separate item to place it with. So just create a new texture. This is going to be an item that represents our display rack block and places it. This is actually the item that the player themselves can acquire. The display rack is only something that is placed. It's going to be a little bit hard to explain, but just go ahead and draw yourself a basic item. So I've got a really crappy image here, but it's going to be good enough to get the point across. So let's just go ahead and save this as a new item and call it a display rack item. We can then come in here, add our own custom item and call it display rack item. Give it our custom texture here. I would highly recommend you do something better than this, but it doesn't really matter how it looks. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm making it look like just a simple bar. Doesn't need any states or any properties like that. Just come in here and make sure that this is display rack and this is listed in functional blocks. We can go ahead and close this and come into display rack here, and you're probably going to want to remove its listing here because this is now going to be a hidden block that the player themselves don't directly pick up or interact with. Instead, we run it all through the display rack item and in this display rack item triggers. The biggest reason we're using an item here is because of this procedure right here. When right clicked on block position, and that passes the direction or trigger face that we have clicked on that block. That is very important when trying to face or place our drying rack. If we didn't have this trigger, it would be much harder, and the display rack, the blocks themselves do not have that trigger available to us. We only have when the block itself is right clicked, but not when we right click another block with this block. So the display rack item is going to be very useful. Let's come in here and add a procedure called display rack item right clicked on block. So if we come into Minecraft components right here, trigger direction / face, we then need logic, and we need to know if trigger direction / face is equal to Minecraft components, north, south, east, or west. And just like that, we know which side of the block we have clicked on. So then with a couple of checks, if we have clicked on the north face of the block, we then check if the block we are trying to place our display rack on is air and is completely empty right now. That is this block right here. So the north direction is negative in the Z. So negative Z in the 1 is where our display rack is trying to be placed. So as long as that is empty and the side of the block that we have just clicked on is solid, then we can feel free to go ahead and place our block. Just keep in mind, you're also going to want to set the direction to north. So then we can do place drying rack with direction set to north at this position. Copy and paste this here. You're going to want to change this from Z in the minus to Z in the plus and change all of these to say south, and we should be good. I almost forgot. We don't want to place it on the block that we have just clicked on. We want to place it on the block next to it. So make sure that where you're placing it, your Z offset is also there. And for these ones, we need an X offset. So in the east, that is a positive X offset, just like this. Let's go ahead and then change these to east. And then change this final one to a positive X offset. Copy paste one more time. Change these to negative and change these to west, and we should be good to go just like that. Let's go ahead and launch the game and make sure that when we right click on the block, our display rack is being placed properly. Now if we go in here and search display rack, we have it right there. And then if we drop down here and right click on this block face, you'll see it successfully places the display rack just like so. Now you'll notice that because we did not set a texture, this front face is just showing up a blank texture or the failed to load texture, but we can fix that very simply. Just come into Mcreator here, create a new texture, create, save this texture, make sure it is a block texture, and save it as display rack default, or you can honestly save it as whatever you'd like, but I'm going to call it display rack default, and it is really just an empty texture. Then we can come into display rack here, set it as display rack default, and now because it has an official texture that is just empty, it will show up as an empty texture here instead of showing up as this texture missing texture. But other than that, we should be good. Let's go ahead and break this block. And we do have our first problem, which is that the display rack does not break itself whenever we break the block it is attached to. And whenever we creative item pick it, it still gives us the display rack itself, so we need to change that. That's quite easy. Just come into the display rack right here and go into properties, creative pick item, and make sure that it is the display rack item. It's also going to have its own custom drops, but sure. Let's go ahead and change it to the display rack item and dropping 1. There we go. Then come in here to triggers and add a when neighbor block changes trigger. Create procedure, and this is going to look very similar to our other procedure, where the first thing we need to do is determine what direction our block is facing. Once we know which direction we are facing, we then pretty much have the same check as we did before, but pretty much in reverse. So is the north side of the block behind it, that is in the south direction, solid? And if it is solid, then we are good. So in fact, we really want to know if it is not solid. And if it is not solid, then we are going to remove the block at this position and drop it at the same position. In fact, we should actually drop it at plus 0.05, because 0.05 is going to put us right at the center of the block, whereas if we just dropped it at XYZ, it would put it in one of the bottom corners, which could potentially result in weird clipping. So just for best practice, we should drop it right there. Go ahead and copy and paste this into here, change the north to south and change the positive to negative. Do it again for west, but change the south to west, change the negative back to a positive, but move it to the X position. Copy and paste one more time, call this east, and change this to the negative position. We should be able to go ahead and save that, and save this. And now whenever our display rack neighbor block changes, it should be able to automatically destroy itself, which should fix all of the problems we were having so far. Let's go ahead and test it. Alrighty, so we do have a slight problem here, which is the fact that our texture is now blank, but it's appearing as a black texture. That's simply because this is set as a solid texture transparency, but if we just change this to cutout, it should fix that problem. And then as far as neighbor block changing goes, if we press a block here, yep, it goes ahead and deletes itself and drops our display rack item. And if we destroy the block there we go, just all the same. So we should be good. Everything seems to be working except for its main functionality, which is of course the ability to display other items. So here's the real trick. For every single item that you want this display rack to be able to display, you're gonna have to come down here to resources, make sure you have 3D models selected, open up your display rack and add a new version of the display rack for every single item you want it capable of displaying. For example, let's say that we want it capable of displaying an iron pick. So I'm going to call this iron pick, add, and then go to it. This texture is going to be all the same. It's still going to be smooth stone because that's the texture for our display rack itself. But this texture right here needs to be an iron pick. Now you can see that that is not an option, so it actually needs to be a block texture, which is actually a whole nother step in the process. So before we can make this so that it displays the iron pick, we're gonna go ahead and save it like this, and then save the iron pickaxe texture as a block texture, because right now it is saved as an item texture. So hopefully you still remember how to pull up item textures and block textures from the vanilla game, because this is going to be the easiest way to get your item textures. Go down here into item and then scroll down until you have whatever item you wish to drop in. For us, that's going to be the iron pick. So let's find the iron pickaxe, which should be right here. drag and drop, save it as a block texture, not an item texture. Then come in here to 3D models, open up the display rack, go to the iron pick, and you'll notice right there, you have your iron pick texture. We can then go ahead and save those mappings and come back to our mod elements. We're gonna have to duplicate this display rack and call it DR, which is short for display rack. You can type it out if you want, but I don't want to, and then call it iron pick. Duplicate it, open it up, change its model to the iron pick model, and then change the properties if you would like to say display rack iron pick, or you can just leave it as display rack. It's totally up to you, but other than that, we should be good. And now that we have two different display racks, we have to be able to convert between them. So let's open our default display rack, go in here to triggers, and do on block right clicked. I don't like having this word on here, so it can just be display rack block right clicked. Boom. The first thing we want to do, because I would recommend having this handle every single type of display rack you have, is check and see if our current block is empty. So if the block is the same block as display rack, then we need to figure out what is in our character's hand. So what I would recommend in here is a big chain of else ifs, all asking about the various items that you can place on your display rack. Our display rack is only capable of holding iron pickaxes, so this is the only item we have to check. If you do have a huge, big, long list of items capable of going on your display rack, you might want to put 2 flow controls here and do a first one to just check for any item tagged as an item capable of going on your display rack, so that if it's not an item, it doesn't not an item capable of going on the display rack, it doesn't run through 50 odd items just to fail and not do anything. This way, if you're checking to see that it is tagged properly, you know that all of this big code, because this else if will get very long if you have lots of items to be able to put on your display rack. That way you're not running through a big long code just for no reason. So I would highly recommend, if you have more than 2 or 3 items going on your display rack, that you have an else if at the very beginning that checks for that the item in the main hand or offhand, just like this, is tagged as an item that can go in your display racks. And if you don't know how tags work, feel free to check out my previous video. But for now, we can check that the main hand has a pickaxe or the offhand has a pickaxe and the main is empty. And if that is the case, then we are going to replace the block at XYZ with a new block with its direction set to the same direction it's already facing. So it's going to be a little bit complicated, but just follow me here. So we need a block here with direction set to the direction of the block that's already there. So we're not changing its direction or anything like that, but we are now placing our iron pick version of our rack instead. And then we are going to remove one iron pick. We can just copy and paste this from the event/target entities main inventory. So let's just double check that. We're double checking that our block is the default display rack. If it is, we then have a big list of possible items that we can put on our display rack. That's where this would be. You can keep expanding this out for every single item that you Burp City, that you want to be able to display it on your rack. Give it a check like this, where this is the item capable of being displayed. Then replace the block with the new block with its direction set to the direction of the previous block. And then remove that item from their main inventory. This should be good. Once again, just make sure that you have this big else if chain for every single item capable of going on your display rack. Next, you should have one more else if down here, where you have all your other types of display rack. Now, what I would recommend here, if you have several types of display rack, is just come down here and do is get block at X tagged as display rack, right? And then create a tag for all of your display racks that have things in them. Do not include your empty display rack in this tag if this is how you choose to go. But we only have one type of display rack that isn't empty, so we really don't need a tag, so I'm not going to use one. I'm just going to check to see if it's the iron pick, but I highly recommend if you have tons and tons and tons of display racks, use the tag, and if it's any of those, then it should pretty much all be the same code, because we need to check to see if it's any of those and the player is crouching. So not only are we checking if it's any of those blocks that is not empty, but we're also checking if it's sneaking, because by sneaking and right clicking on the block, that is how they are going to get their item back and replace the display rack. So if they are indeed doing that, then we pretty much have the same code right here, except instead of checking for the main hand, we are just checking the block. So if you have a big long tag right here instead of the specific block, then you're gonna need another else if in here that's checking each individual block, just like this. But because we only have one block, we don't have several, we don't actually need this second else if. We can just do this, and what we need to do is, instead of replacing it with dr iron, we need to replace it with regular old dr, or dr empty, whatever you want to call it. And then instead of removing one iron pick, we could add one iron pick. If you scroll down here, you can see set one iron pick in slot 0 of event target entity, whatever if it has inventory. I don't really like that idea, because if the player's inventory is full or anything like that, it's just not going to work. So instead, let's just spawn the iron pick as a dropped item. Let's go ahead and delete that and move this here at XYZ with a pickup delay of let's do 4. That's a fraction of a second. Actually, I think 10 ticks is just fine. Let's go ahead and remove this, and in theory this should be working no problem. Now keep in mind our best practices whenever we're dropping items. We don't want to drop items directly at a block position. Remember, that's going to put it at the corner and potentially clip it through various blocks. So best practice whenever you're dropping new items on the ground is to drop them at plus 0.5, and that's going to put it right at the center of whatever block you're dropping it at, which should help prevent weird clipping issues. But as far as I can tell, this should pretty much be our display rack fully integrated. So let's go ahead and save this, come back to our mod element here, on block right clicked on, yes, and we're also going to have to go into every single one of our display racks and make sure that that display rack block right clicked on is the exact same. Now let's go ahead and launch it just to test it out one more time. All right, here we are. Let's go ahead and test placing down our display racks, and you will see that that big black square is now gone. If we right click on the display racks, nothing happens, nothing's going on whatsoever. We can't replace them. If we destroy this block, it goes ahead and drops itself, so that is good as well. Let's go ahead and grab ourselves an iron pick and test it finally for the moment of truth. So when we right click on the display rack with the iron pick, it goes ahead and removes it from our inventory, puts it on the display rack. It's even got a nice tilt to it. And then when we right click on that, nothing happens. We could make it so that if both our hands are empty, it does work as well. I kind of like that idea. Else, if we are crouching and we right click on it, well, that didn't work because I had a block in my hand, but let's go ahead and crouch and right click on it again. And you can see it goes ahead and pops out the iron pick and goes back to our default display rack. So that should be everything working properly. Now let's say that you wanted to go ahead and add one more item or several more items to be able to display on your display rack. The first thing you would have to do is come down here to resources, 3D models. Well, actually, before that, go to your texture files, and every single item that you want displayed on this display rack, you're gonna have to import it as a block texture. So make sure that all of your items are imported as block textures up here. Then go to your 3D models and add a new version of the display rack for every single type that you want. Fill them out the same way I filled out my iron pick, and then save. Then copy and paste your iron pick one or your regular display rack one until you have a block version for every single type that you want. Make sure that when you click on it, it's on block right click and neighbor block triggers are all still the same. Then go into your display rack block right clicked on trigger right here. As far as this one goes, you can leave it the exact same. This is your empty iron pick or empty display rack was right clicked on. However, as soon as we get in here, I would then recommend that your very first flow control, and I know I've already said this, but I'm saying it one more time just in case it's confusing. Make sure that your very first flow control is pulling the item from the tags. So you can actually go ahead and leave this the exact same, but instead of referencing a direct item, reference a tagged item, just like this, and then make this tag the tag that has every single item capable of going on your display rack. That way, with that first check that you're doing, you're making sure that we are indeed clicking on the display rack with an item where it matters, so that we don't do a bunch of code for no reason. After you've done that first initial check, then you can have a chain of else ifs that all look the same as our previous one, where you're just checking that known value, and then you're executing that function right here, where you're replacing it with whatever item is up here, and then removing whatever item they had in their inventory as well. So I hope that all made sense as far as how to handle adding a new item rack and adding a new item to it. But just for the one item, we don't need all of this fancy mumbo jumbo. We can get rid of that and just leave it at this. And then for this, one more time, I will reiterate what happens if you have several item racks. This first else if, what you're going to want to do is check that the block here is tagged as the same blocks or the all of the display racks here. So if you have an iron pick, so for me, this tag would only consist of the iron pick display rack. But for you all, this tag could would consist of every single DR item. So not the empty display rack, but every single other display rack block that you have. So if it is one of those blocks or tagged as one of those blocks, and the player is sneaking, or their hand is empty, or however you want the requirement to be for them to be able to take the item off this display rack, for me, sneaking is just fine. Assuming that you have the tag up here, all you need to do is once again have a big long chain of else ifs that considers every single type of block and then does the proper function for them, replacing it with the empty display rack. In fact, if we've already verified that the tag is empty, or that the tag is triggered, we don't even need to have this in the else ifs. In fact, the only thing we need in the else ifs is spawning the proper dropped item. It will always replace the block with the empty display rack, so you can just put this at the end of the else if chain. Be warned, do not put it at the beginning of the else if chain, because then your get block at will never be true, because you've already replaced with the empty display rack item. But if you have your big item tag up here, then you can just go through the chain, spawn your dropped item, and when you get to the end, replace your display rack with the empty display rack. But because we only have one display rack, none of that is necessary. We can just leave it all like this and we are good to go. So I hope that all made sense. I know it's a little bit intuitive and it is a ton of copy paste work and a ton of crazy nonsense, but this is a very cool ability to be able to do in Mcreator. Lots of people think that stuff like this is just completely impossible in Mcreator, and I wanted to get a quick tutorial out on how to do stuff like this for you all. So I would like to leave you with a last couple of thoughts that I have had here. This is actually a post-credits, post-editing ace here. You can see here we've already got the video pretty much all the way edited, but I had a couple of thoughts. The first one being, I believe if we break our display rack, it will not properly drop the item that is on it. It will only drop the display rack item. And we can actually test that incredibly easily by just destroying this display rack right here. And you can see we get the display rack back, but it does not give us our iron pick, which is of course a problem. I think the easiest way to fix that would probably be going inside of each of our DR display racks, or display racks that have items, and adding a custom trigger when block destroyed. I don't think it has to be when block destroyed by player. I think it can just be maybe either of these, maybe both of these, and then just have it so that it simply spawns in the item that it was holding once it's been destroyed. So for this one, it would specifically be the iron pickaxe. So whenever it's destroyed, it spawns in an iron pickaxe, and that should compensate for the fact that it otherwise wouldn't. So I think that's that problem fixed. We will have to come into our neighbor block changes procedure though, and make it so that whenever we are removing the block at right here, I believe we are also going to have to call the advanced procedure that spawns in the thing, depending on what block it is. So this could get rather complicated really quickly. Just something I've noticed. And the other problem I noticed with our display rack is if it has durability, it probably won't track the durability properly. And what I mean by that is if I put this iron pick on the rack, which only has a partial durability, as you can see, I can almost guarantee you when I pull it off the rack by shift and clicking, it will have full durability. Yep. And I can almost guarantee you, no matter what that durability is, if I put it on the rack and then take it off, it will always give it to me with full durability back. So essentially, in order to fix this, whenever we right click on it, we will have to pull the durability of the item, save it to the block as maybe a block state value or possibly a NBT data value. And then when we right click on it to get it back, we assign that number value to the damage value of the pickaxe. I don't even know if that would work. But let's see what you clever folks out there on YouTube come up with. See if you can fix these problems that we have identified here at the end, or see if you can find a way around them. I do believe that the block breaking problem could potentially pose a serious issue, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and if it is a serious problem, I might post an addendum video on how to fix these two problems. But that's all the time I've got for now. I don't want this video to run too long, so I will just leave it as a challenge for you all to see if you can fix it yourself. But without further ado, peace out, take care, and I'll see you all next time.